right, let's kick off another deep dive. This time we're heading way back, ancient China.
A golden age of philosophy.
Yeah, think ancient Greece, but in China. Tons of intellectual debates, new philosophies popping up left and right.
Exactly, a real fertile period for ideas.
And for this deep dive, we're looking at a passage from Zhuangzi.
One of the most important texts in Taoism, for sure.
Right, and it's kind of like a philosophical travel guide to different schools of thought in ancient China. Like, what were people thinking about? How should we live? All that good stuff.
It's like stepping into a time machine and hearing these brilliant minds wrestle with, well, questions we still ask today.
Okay, so like, what's the best way to live?
Yeah, exactly. How should we govern ourselves? What even is reality? Big questions.
I'm already hooked. So where do we even start with all this? It's a lot to unpack.
Right. Well, the Zhuangzi, it starts with this lament for the fragmentation of the Tao.
The Tao, right? The way.
Yeah, exactly. The way with a capital W, that concept of like ultimate truth and living in harmony with everything. But the author is saying it's been shattered, like broken into a million pieces. And each philosophical school, they're all clinging to just a tiny fragment of it.
Ooh, I like that. Like we're all looking at the same puzzle, but we're only focused on our little corner of it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So does the Zhuangzi say why this happened, this whole fragmentation thing?
Well, you got to think about the context, right? This was ancient China, a time of crazy upheaval wars, changing power, tons of uncertainty.
So people were looking for answers. Makes sense.
Exactly. They wanted something solid, something to hold on to in this chaotic world.
And so, bam, all these different schools of thought pop up, each with their own spin on the Tao.
Exactly. And the Zhuangzi, it really dives into the nitty-gritty of these debates. It's like we get to meet all these fascinating characters, each representing a different philosophical approach.
Oh, I love that. So who's the first philosophical rock star we meet?
Well, get ready for this Mosi. Known for his radical ideas, we're talking universal love and extreme self-denial.
Okay, universal love, I'm on board with that. But self-denial, how extreme are we talking here?
We're talking no music, no fancy funerals, no art. Basically anything even remotely pleasurable was out. Mosi saw it as a waste.
Wow, that's intense. I get wanting to help others and all, but banning music. Did this guy ever even, like, smile?
Right. It does seem pretty harsh on the surface, but to get Mosi, you really have to get the context. Imagine the suffering he was seeing. Poverty, war, unnecessary death. He thought it all stemmed from, well, from extravagance and people not focusing on basic needs.
So he's like, simplify people, get your priorities straight.
Exactly. And he walked the walk, too, lived a super austere life, even got tons of followers to do the same, really thought this was the path to a better society.
Huh. Gotta admire the dedication, even if I don't think I could give up my music.
Yeah.
So what did the Zhuangzi think about all this? It doesn't sound super harmonious to me.
You're picking up on it. The Zhuangzi recognizes Mozi's good intentions, but it kind of critiques him for being so rigid. It's like, yeah, reducing suffering is great, but maybe there's a way to do it without, sucking all the joy out of life.
Right, like trying to force the world into your very specific mold probably isn't the best way to go about things.
Exactly. And it's not just the self-denial thing. The Zhuangzi also questions Mozi's certainty that he and only he had the one true answer. This kind of dogmatic thinking, it can actually lead to more conflict. Remember, we're looking for that way, that harmonious path.
So Mozi's heart was in the right place. But maybe his approach was, well, maybe a little too rigid, a little too self-righteous to truly embody the Tao.
You got it. So let's move on, shall we? Let's meet some folks who took a different route, a little more laid back, a little more go with the flow.
Sounds good to me. Bring on the chill vibes.
Okay, so if Mozi was all about, like, no fun allowed, let's meet some folks who took, well, a more relaxed approach.
Yeah, less self-denial, more self-discovery.
Right. You got it. We're talking about Songjing and Yinwen. These guys were all about inner peace, detaching from all those worldly worries.
I can dig that. I mean, today it feels like we're always being told we need more stuff, more experiences, more everything. It's refreshing to hear about folks, even way back then, advocating for a simpler path, more inward focused.
Absolutely. And what's really cool is how their ideas connect to this core Taoist principle, Wu Wei.
Non-action, right.
Yeah, but it's a little more nuanced than just sitting around doing nothing.
Okay, good, because that didn't sound too appealing.
Right. It's more about this effortless action, like being in sync with the natural flow of things.
I'm kind of getting it. So, like, instead of forcing things to happen, you go with the flow.
Exactly. Imagine like a surfer riding a wave. They're not fighting against the ocean. They're working with it, using its power. That's Wu Wei.
Okay, that's a cool way to think about it. So it's about finding that balance between effort and ease.
Yeah. It's like the action becomes instinctual, like a dance with the universe.
I like that. But how does that actually work, like in everyday life?
Well, think about decisions. Someone practicing Wu Wei, they might pause before reacting, take a moment to really feel the situation before jumping in.
So it's about being more mindful,
Hmm.
not just like knee-jerk reacting to everything.
Totally. And it's also about like choosing actions that feel right,
Right.
align with your purpose, not just what'll get you more stuff or make you look good.
So choosing the path of least resistance, but not in a lazy way, more like finding the most harmonious way forward.
Exactly. And in leadership, Wu Wei can look like guiding and empowering others, less about like bossing people around.
Interesting. So a leader who's more like a facilitator,
Hmm.
helping things unfold naturally.
Yeah, that's it. And it wasn't just Song Shing and Yin Wen who were into this idea of aligning with the natural order.
Oh,
The Zhuangzi, it introduces us to these other figures too, Peng Meng, Tianpian, Shen Dao.
okay. I'm sensing a theme here.
Right. These guys took it even further. They believed in adapting to whatever life throws at you. No judgment, just going with it.
So less about imposing our will on the world and more about like rolling with the punches,
Mm,
adapting.
you got it. It's radical, but also kind of liberating. It
Mhm.
makes you question all those ideas about what's right and wrong and just embrace how fluid life really is.
I can see the appeal of that, just like letting go of judgment, being present. But I'm also wondering, doesn't that get a little tricky? Like, what about, you know, not so great behavior? If there's no right or wrong, how do we like function as a society?
You've hit on a big one. It's this tension between individual freedom and social harmony, right?
Right.
If we ditch all moral judgments, how do we stop things from falling apart?
That's a huge question. Does the Zhuangzi give us any hints about how to handle this?
Well, it's not about giving a straight answer. It's more about pushing us to really think about it. And it hints at a different way to think about morality, less about rules, more about inner virtues.
Okay, so not just don't do this, don't do that. It's more about developing your character.
Exactly. You cultivate things like compassion, humility, understanding how we're all connected. And that naturally leads to more harmonious behavior.
Right, because if you really get that we're all interconnected, then harming someone else is like harming yourself too.
Exactly. And this is where Laozi comes in, the founder of Taoism. He was all about yielding, humility, aligning yourself with the natural flow.
Oh yeah, lousy. We talked about him a little earlier. So, like, what were his main ideas and how do they fit into all this?
Well, Laozi believed that true strength comes from emptiness, from being like receptive and adaptable, like water.
Water. Okay, I'm listening.
He emphasized taking the low position, yielding to others, leading with humility and gentleness, not force.
That's pretty radical, especially in a world that's often all about, like, being assertive, dominating. It almost sounds, I don't know, kind of naive.
I know, right? But Laozi was a master of paradox. He understood that real power, it's not about brute force, it's about aligning yourself with the natural principles of the universe.
So it's more about harnessing the power of softness, of yielding, like moving with the current instead of against it.
Exactly. Imagine a blade of grass. When the wind blows, it bends, it doesn't relent, it doesn't break, it just adapts and it comes back stronger. That's the kind of resilience Laozi was talking about.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the connections here. We've got Mozi with his strict rules, Song Jiang and Yin Wen finding inner peace, those guys rejecting moral judgments altogether, and now Laozi talking about yielding and humility. It's like a whole spectrum of approaches to life, each with its own pluses and minuses.
And the cool thing is Zhuangzi, it doesn't judge any of them. It's like, here are all these ideas, now you figure out what works for you.
I love that. It's not telling us what to think, it's giving us the tools to think for ourselves,
Mm.
to explore and find our own path.
Exactly. And that's why exploring these ancient wisdom traditions is so valuable. They give us these timeless insights that can help us navigate life, make sense of it all.
Totally. This has been such a mind-blowing deep dive.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm starting to understand ancient Chinese thought in a whole new way,
Yeah,
and it's amazing how much it still resonates with us today.
it really is.
Okay, before we wrap up, I have one more question. The Zhuangzi starts by talking about how the Tao got fragmented, broken up into all these different schools. What do you think the text is trying to tell us about how we approach knowledge and truth? like today? Are we still making the same mistakes?
Yeah, it's like, look around. It's everywhere, right? So many
Yeah.
different ideologies, political parties, you name it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like they're all speaking different languages sometimes. It's hard to even have a conversation.
Right. And I think it's because, well, we all want to be right. We want certainty. So we cling to our own little version of the truth.
And that makes it hard to see the big picture, right? Like, we're so focused on our little piece of the puzzle, we forget there's a whole puzzle there.
Exactly. So the question is, how do we break out of that? How do we, avoid making the same mistakes as those ancient schools?
Yeah, if they were all just grabbing at pieces of the Tao, how do we do better?
Well, I think the Zhuangzi, it gives us some hints. Remember those qualities we talked about?
Yeah.
Humility, yielding, embracing paradox.
Yeah, yeah. Those were good ones.
Those are key, I think, to navigating a world where, well, where there are just so many different viewpoints.
Okay, so humility first. How does that help us see beyond our own, limited perspective?
It's like, imagine going into any conversation, especially a tough one, and really believing that, hey, you might not have all the answers. That's humility.
So it's not about like pretending you don't have an opinion. It's more about being open to learning from other people.
Yeah, exactly. Even from people you disagree with, remembering that your view, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Makes sense. And what about yielding? How does that fit in?
Well, instead of, digging in your heels and defending your position no matter what, you practice being flexible. You let yourself be swayed by new information, a different argument.
So you're more adaptable, more resilient.
Yeah, like that blade of grass. It bends with the wind instead of breaking.
I love that image.
Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, embracing paradox.
Right. The Zhuangzi reminds us that, well, things are rarely simple. The world is messy, contradictory. There are tons of gray areas.
It's like that quote, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time.
Yes, exactly. And, the Zhuangzi, he'd probably add a little joke in there somewhere, too. He'd tell us to not just tolerate paradox, but to, enjoy it.
Yeah, to find the humor in the fact that the universe is just this big, weird, complex thing. We can't possibly understand it all.
Exactly. We got to let go of that need for certainty, for one right answer. Embrace the mystery, the ambiguity.
It's about being okay with not knowing everything, right? And being open to all the possibilities.
Yes. And when we do that, I think we open ourselves up to a much richer understanding of the world and ourselves.
I love that. This has been such an amazing journey. I feel like we've learned so much about ancient Chinese thought. And it's incredible how relevant it still is today.
It really is. Those ancient thinkers, they were grappling with the same fundamental questions we're still asking today.
Totally. And if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that wisdom. It's not just about knowing a lot of facts.
Right. It's so much more than that.
It's about cultivating those qualities: humility, open-mindedness, flexibility, and a sense of humor.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Hmm.
And as we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. The Zhuangzi, it ends with a question, not an answer. If all these schools were grasping at parts of the way, what does that tell us about how we approach knowledge and truth today?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's an invitation, to keep exploring, to keep asking those big questions. Never stop seeking deeper understanding.
I love that. So, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those profound questions. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into ancient Chinese thought.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open to the infinite possibilities of the Tao.